So what's the feeling on the ground in Ukraine after Donald Trump announced the pause in military aid? Michael Bociurkiw is a global affairs analyst and Atlantic Council senior fellow, and he joins me now from Odesa in southern Ukraine. Michael, good to have you with us. Now, before we talk about all the aid issues, there were some attacks that are targeted a number of cities, Odesa, where you are, being one of them. Firstly, how are you doing, and what's the situation there at the moment?
Thank you for asking, and good afternoon from Odesa. Well, it was pretty bad last night. I was outside walking, and I'm lucky I walked fast because about a kilometer behind me or so, or maybe 2 kilometers, there was a direct hit from a Russian drone. It hit apparently critical infrastructure boiler plants, and it is cold here right now, so that's a very bad development. But the bigger one was about 2 or 3 days ago when a Russian ballistic missile took a direct hit on a Panamanian-flagged Swiss-owned container vessel, a big one. And this is significant because it's just when the Ukrainians are getting the container part of the port going for the first time during the war. And you can imagine the blow of confidence that will send through ship owners, insurance companies, and it needs to be said that this is something that will reverberate not only through Ukraine, but through many different economies if this vital commercial lifeline stops.
Yes, and how are Ukrainians feeling about that, of their own security, given what has happened and given the ongoing attacks by Russia?
Well, the best way I could put it to you is this is a very dark hour for Ukraine. What has been going on, the kind of escalation through drones and missiles, but also on the front line, and then couple that with the temporary pause, hopefully it's only temporary, in U.S. military aid to Ukraine. It's well appreciated here that Europe can't suddenly flip the switch and take over the 40% or so that the U.S., 30 to 40% U.S. still provides to Ukraine. Gone will be the, for example, the Patriot missiles. I understand that Ukraine's supply is up till about next month at best. These are the same missiles that protect Ukrainian skies. There's advanced air defense systems, surface ballistic missiles, long-range rocket artillery, ammunition. But the big question right now is whether the U.S. will continue intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians, intelligence that helps them strike within Russia, troop movements, and also incoming. And then, again, the Patriot missile defense system, if that's disabled or they run out, it will leave Ukraine very, very exposed.
Yes, and you just spoke about the intelligence sharing, and we're not quite sure whether that will continue or also halt along with other military equipment. What might be the impact of the absence of military intelligence sharing?
Very bad. It will create a blind spot for the Ukrainians. Because if you take the lack of intelligence targeting information, for example, with the lack of ATACMS missiles, those really powerful medium-range missiles, because they come with restrictions from the United States. That's a big, big blow to the Ukrainians. But also, I think this current void right now is something that Mr. Putin will be very, very tempted to exploit. Gain more land on the front line, maybe go for Konstantinovka. Also, the possibility, and I hate to say this, but I think it's important to lay things out candidly and clearly, is he may actually go beyond Kherson, where they're now on the Russian side of the Dnipro River, towards Mykolaiv, towards Odesa, towards the Moldova border, linking up the Russian mainland with Transnistria. That would, in an instant, pretty much make Ukraine a landlocked country.
Yes, and having said that, I want to get your thoughts on that point. And given that, you had a very close call, and we're glad that you're safe. But how are you feeling in terms of your safety, in the weeks to come, given that the vulnerabilities that might be there with the absence of all that we're talking about at the moment?
Well, I think the invincibility, it really describes so well the kind of armor the Ukrainians wear here, especially in Odesa, when it comes to external threats. But having said that, I mean, being here for the better part of 3 years, I am seeing beneath the surface a very, very growing weariness, but also fear. And I'm seeing for the first time a lot of movers and shakers of this beautiful city and region. If they haven't left already, they're now thinking of leaving, selling property, moving their relatives. This is going to be a huge blow to the economy, which is already wobbling quite a bit.
Yes, and did this announcement from the Oval Office, was this in reaction to what Volodymyr Zelenskyy had to say, that this the end of the war with Russia was very far away? That's something that the US president really didn't want to hear.
Yeah, that certainly wasn't helpful. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but I watched that news conference where he said that in London on Sunday night very carefully. And it was almost like he was provoking Mr. Trump. His words did make it back to Washington, of course. And there are, I would say a significant chunk of people here who say Mr. Zelenskyy probably would have been better to zip it up and not provoke Mr. Trump. But I will tell you one other thing, and I think this is of interest to people in Indo-Pacific, is that it's not the first time Mr. Zelenskyy has been tested or pushed. Back in 2021, at the height of the COVID crisis, Ukraine was quite late to procure vaccines, so they had to go to China to get their vaccines. There was a shipment of 500,000 doses headed for Ukraine, but China called Mr. Zelenskyy and said, we just noticed Ukraine's name is on a joint UN resolution criticizing China's treatment of minorities in the country. And Ukraine stepped back, took their name off, and the vaccines arrived. So I bring this up is because maybe it's time for Mr. Zelenskyy, and I know it's going to be painful and it sets a bad precedent, but maybe step back, apologize, and move forward. But maybe things have moved too far ahead in Washington for this to be saved. And one more quick thing. I think given that the king met with Mr. Zelenskyy, King Charles, and he's going to be meeting with Mr. Trump, maybe he can play a background role to bridge the two sides.
Yes, and part of that bridge might be that Europe-led peace plan that Keir Starmer was speaking about, along with Kiev. Do you think that's been threatened now?
Well, I don't think there was that much, honestly, to begin with. We're talking about £3.5 to £4 million, 5,000 missiles and a loan. But I think the Europeans have to take on a bigger sense of urgency, more action and not words. And I think they should also consider very, very quickly, like this week, to move on unfreezing those $300 billion of frozen Russian assets. In other words, not just using the interest off of it, but also the principal to help fund Ukraine. Because a lot of these countries that are promising aid, and a lot are not taking part, for example, Spain is a big one, their economies are in big trouble too. There are competing priorities. So cash is a very, very big issue for the Europeans in terms of helping Ukraine.
Yes, but one other way of helping Ukraine, and this has been alluded by quite a few leaders, is the possibility of having boots on the ground, either working alongside Ukrainian troops or in a peacekeeping capacity. Does that give Ukrainians any sort of confidence?
I think the Ukrainians have discounted that possibility because Mr. Putin has said that will not happen. And unfortunately, he is in a position to violate any agreements if he even agrees to anything. And he doesn't care. When I was with the OSCE in 2014, 2015, we saw how the Russians reacted to us and blocked us and things like that. So I think what would be more sensible if they can build up the bravery in themselves is for countries like Poland to provide more air cover, that sort of thing to Ukraine. But things need to move a lot quicker than they are now.
Okay, Michael Bociurkiw, always appreciate your time and for your insights and analysis from southern Ukraine. Please do stay safe. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.